At this point, you probably heard of ChatGPT, the large language model released by OpenAI that can generate human-like responses to text input. It's been turning heads all over the world because of its amazing results. What I would like to focus in this video is how you can use ChatGPT for learning complex subjects. In essence, what I want to discuss is 7 strategies you can use to leverage ChatGPT for learning complex topics. The first strategy that I would like to discuss is interactive conversations. So let's say you have a question like, what is a neural network, right? I can get this question and I can paste it in ChatGPT. So what's a neural network? And then it gives me a response. In this case, it said a neural network is a type of machine learning algorithm modeled after the structure and function of the human brain, all right? It consists of layers of interconnected neurons that process and transmit information. Neural networks are used for a variety of tasks, such as image and speech recognition, natural language processing, and decision making. They're particularly useful for identifying patterns and features in complex data. The thing I think is really interesting about the workflow of learning with ChatGPT is that I can get the response that it gives me and then iterate over that response. So I could say something like, how does a neural network learn patterns from the data? And then from the response that ChatGPT is going to give me, I'm going to continue to iterate over by asking questions and taking notes and making sure that that conversation is being fruitful for me, that I'm actually engaging with the content that I'm interested in. So the answer that I got was a neural network learns patterns from data by adjusting strengths or weights of the connections between the neurons. The process is known as training the network. During training, the network is presented with a set of input-output pairs called the training set. The network uses these pairs to adjust the weights of its connections in order to produce the correct output for a given input. So far, it's a pretty, boilerplate explanation of how neural networks learn. The process of adjusting weights is done by an algorithm called backpropagation. Backpropagation calculates error between network's output and desired output and propagates this error back through the network, adjusting the weights in a way that reduces the error. Process is repeated, All right. And then it mentions gradient descent at the end. Okay, so I have 2 things here that I'm interested in, backpropagation and gradient descent. So now I can say, can you explain to me the backpropagation algorithm? And then it goes, the backpropagation is used to train a neural network by adjusting the weights of its connections. The algorithm is called backpropagation because it propagates the error from the network output layer through the network, adjusting the weights of these connections as it goes. And then it gives me a detailed explanation of the process. So there's a feed-forward pass where the input is passed through the network and the output is produced. Then there's a step of calculating the error, that's correct. And then you backpropagate the error back, you adjust the weights, and then you repeat. What I would continue to do here is continue to iterate over my questions and have a conversation, getting those responses. And then, sometimes I would come here and say, okay, so there are a few things that are important to know. So there's like backpropagation, gradient descent. There's this idea of adjusting the weights, layers, etc. What I think is interesting about this strategy is that one of the main drivers of learning is feedback. And I'm not talking feedback in the sense of, you ask a question and you get a response, or you get the correct solution for a problem, or whatever simplified definition of feedback. When I say feedback, in this case, I mean continuous feedback. As you learn and go through a subject, you want to have the capability of having feedback on what you understand. And by having the possibility of engaging with an agent of some sort that can give you concrete feedback in a topic that you're learning, this can really boost your learning in general, because you don't have to have these delays. Say if you search for something, then you got to find a good source for that particular thing that you're looking for. And then from there, you read through don't know how much of text in order to get to the thing that you want. When you can just ask and get a conversation out of when you can turn learning into an engaging conversation where you have feedback, I think that boosts learning a whole bunch. So now the second point I would like to make is about content summarization. I'm going to be writing the strategies here. So interactive conversations, and now content Summarization. The idea with content summarization is when you're learning a new topic, you're gonna have to go through textbooks and papers and web articles and videos, etc. At least in my experience, one of the ways that I waste a lot of time when I'm learning something new is going through a bunch of materials in order to get to that one resource or to that one material that has the content that I was looking for. And one of the ways that having a tool like ChatGPT, although this idea is not new at all, is to be able to summarize content that you want to engage with, but you're not sure if that content really has the ideas and discusses the topics that you're interested in. And to demonstrate that, let's take a paper like Attention is All You Need, which is the paper that started this whole transformer revolution where you're using transformers models for pretty much everything. So I get this paper, I get this abstract, which is already a summarized version of the paper, so I'm not really interested in getting a summary of a summary. But let's say this paper, and let's say I copy the introduction, right? And I'm feeling lucky, so I copied the introduction and the background, and I paste that into ChatGPT, and then I say write a summary. And now what I get in return is just a summary of that piece of text from that paper. Now, of course, it's not ideal to be copying and pasting text from a paper into ChatGPT because that can be, troublesome in itself. But the main idea here being that instead of having to go through an entire paper, you can get a summary, like I just did here. Transformers and neural network architecture for sequence modeling, transduction problems such as language modeling, machine translation. I can get a summary and then make a decision whether or not I want to continue reading and going through that paper. And I can do that with book chapters, and I can do that with web articles, and I can do that with YouTube videos. For example, if I go to YouTube, what is a neural network? So I can come over to show transcript, and then I can literally just copy the transcript of that video. Oh, sorry. Let's go back, and I can copy the summary of that video, and I can come here to ChatGPT, paste that here. And one of the things with doing this is that sometimes you will get that the text is too long. The message you submitted was too long. So one little hack that I do, although I'm sure there's a better way, there's a quicker way, but this is my hack for doing this. I paste it into something like VS Code. I then delete the timestamps. So I select all the timestamps from that video. I then delete the timestamps. So now the text is all together, and it's a bit shorter because now it doesn't have the timestamps. And what I will do also is, after doing that, I will select the points, and then I'll use VS Code shortcut Control-D to access all the moments where in the transcript where it had a point to do a pause. And what I'll do is I'll return one line per point and then give a space. Yeah, I think that's okay. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it will work. And since I still think it's too big, let's take a look at I can use VS Code's capabilities to see how many words were selected. So kind of like too many. So what I'll do is I'll come here at the end and I'll remove the end part of the video where, usually in YouTube video at the end, people are saying, subscribe, like, etc. So I'm removing a bit of the text, and finally I get that text, I paste it into ChatGPT. So let's paste this, and I'll say write a video summary. And what I get in return is a summary of that video. Let's switch this up. There we go. What I get in return is a summary of that video. Neural network is a type of machine learning algorithm inspired by the structure of the brain, consists of layers of interconnected neurons. And then he discusses the fact that in that particular video, the author talks about, recognizing handwritten digits. And this is a great summary. This is a competent summary of a content that usually would take 20 minutes to watch. That doesn't mean that this replaces watching the video, but now I can make a more informed decision of whether or not I want to watch that video. Hopefully, the point drives across that content summarization is quite a useful feature to have. And it's quite useful when that feature can be accessed quickly. That can be helpful in a variety of scenarios when you're learning a new topic. So the third strategy that I think is useful for using ChatGPT for learning is getting detailed explanations of complicated topics, complicated / complex topics. Now, that seems a bit obvious, but one of the things that I think is just really paramount is your ability to get something that looks complex in the surface and be able to quickly deconstruct it. To showcase that, I want to show you an example. So I'm trying to learn how to program better, right? Right now, I'm trying to study a little bit more about object-oriented programming in the Python programming language. And let's say I want to learn what is polymorphism. Now, in the context of object-oriented programming using Python. So I'll say, even better, I'll say, explain to me what is polymorphism in the context of object-oriented programming using Python. And what I get in response is exactly what I asked for. A detailed explanation of a topic that's, relatively complex. In this case, polymorphism. So he goes, polymorphism is a concept in object-oriented programming that refers to the ability of a single function or method to work with multiple types of objects. That's true. In Python, polymorphism allows a function or method to work with different types of objects, even if they have a different internal structures or methods. This is achieved through a mechanism called duck typing, where the function or method checks that the object passed to it and has the necessary attributes or methods to perform its task, rather than checking the type of the object. For example, consider the following code. In this case, since I got a code sample, let's copy that code and test it on VS Code. So I'm pasting on my text editor. I'm saving as ChatGPT polymorphism. And now I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm going to run this code, ChatGPT. And as you can see, incredibly enough, the code runs. Now, I'm not really defending that you just blindly believe the outputs of ChatGPT, because one, it doesn't reference its sources. So that's just that's the first red flag, that you should not trust blindly whatever you're getting out of ChatGPT. However, for topics that are very easily checkable, like programming concepts, pragmatic definitions of things in science, chemistry, mathematics, programming, etc., ChatGPT is absolutely incredible, because it will explain to you what something is, and it will break it down. It will give examples. It can form analogies. It can give you concrete examples of whatever you're looking for. So the ability to quickly get detailed explanations about a topic is just incredible. Okay, so for the fourth strategy that I think ChatGPT is quite useful is writing procedures for stuff. So writing procedures. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of the times learning is not just about, learning just general concepts that you can apply to a lot of things. A lot of times, mostly in programming, that's definitely true, you're learning procedures, which is just a sequence of predefined steps to do something. For example, if I'm learning how to write an algorithm, I'm learning how to write a set of steps to solve a problem, right? And that's another thing that you can use ChatGPT for that's quite incredible. You can use ChatGPT to write procedures for pretty much, anything you can think of. Now, I'm not saying that those will be necessarily correct, and you should never blindly believe whatever you're getting out of ChatGPT. However, for, again, things that are either easily checkable or for things that lack ambiguity, like ambiguity, things that are not too ambiguous, ChatGPT is incredible. So let's do an example. I'm gonna ask a classic traditional question in programming. Write the steps for the binary search algorithm. Now, this is a boilerplate question for coding interviews, and I'll admit that's a simple question, but the point here is to drive across the idea of getting procedures out of ChatGPT. So I ask, writing the steps for the binary search algorithm, and what I get in return is literally the steps for the binary search algorithm. Set the lower and upper bounds of the search range, start at end, insert array, boom. Those look correct, but I can even go further into the procedures and ask for code samples. So write the code in Python for the binary search algorithm. And this is what I get. Now, we all know that ChatGPT is incredible for writing code, but the point I'm trying to drive across here is not just that you can write complex procedures, but the fact that you can get step-by-step descriptions of something that's relatively pragmatic, something that it feels unintuitive to have to search for and find it on the internet, when it's much easier if you can access a database of some sort. ChatGPT is great for that as well. We can now test this code to see if it works. So I'm just going to create another file here, and just going to be binary search. I already tried that with ChatGPT, but let's try the second version. So I'm going to paste it here on my editor, and I'm going to say binary search, and boom, found it. Now, again, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because although writing code with ChatGPT might feel incredible, you should never take it as you still have to know how to write code. You still have to understand what's being written, because your debugging is going to take forever if you just blindly trust the outputs of the model. The thing I'm trying to drive across is not to, get free code from ChatGPT, but you can use this feature of writing procedures to speed up processes and things that you're trying to learn by getting the procedures out of pragmatic things that they're involved in this thing. For example, let's get something more fun, like write the procedure for cooking rice. And what I get in return is quite awesome. Rinse the rice in a fine mesh strainer under. So measure out the desired amount of rice and add it to a pot or saucepan. I mean, this is just insane. What you're getting is just a description. I'm not sure. I'm not a great cook, so I'm not 100% sure this is correct. But to drive the point across, you can get procedures out of ChatGPT. Okay, so point number 5. Now, point number 5 is creating exercises/challenges for learning topics. Now, what do I mean? Say you're learning how to code, right? And you already learned some of the syntax and you want to work on some small projects. You can look it up, projects to do with Python. You can do something like that for sure. But sometimes you can have these, I don't know how to describe, it's kind of like a decision friction thing that happens where you're like, it's hard to start. It's hard to just begin. What should I do? What should I work on? By having a tool like that, you can just quickly get to what you need by just asking for, exercises with solutions. And in this case, I have to reiterate that when we're asking for exercises with answers, which is something you can do with ChatGPT, remember, don't blindly believe what you get out of it, and just use it for things that you can quickly check, by Googling or whatever. And you can quickly check the validity of the information that you're getting, because the room for misinformation is huge, so you have to be careful. However, for practicing topics like programming, for example, like write me 5 simple Python exercises with corresponding solutions. And now he goes, write a Python function that takes a list of numbers as input and returns the sum of all even numbers in the list. And then he writes the code for the thing. So what I could do is I could just not look at the code. I could copy this question. I could come to VS Code. I could do something like create a new Jupyter notebook. And I'm gonna call this ChatGPT Python exercises. I can paste the question here, write a Python function that takes a list of numbers as input and returns the sum of all even numbers in the list, right? And now I can write the code for this description. Okay, so some even numbers, and just let's say it will have num list, and then for n in num list, so the number has to be even. So if divided by 2, I think that's it, right? It's equal to 0. I'm gonna say total equals 0, total plus equal n, and then return total. And now I can write some tests like some even numbers. Let's give it a list. I have GitHub Copilot in this VS Code editor, so write tests for the above function. This is actually super cool. And then now I can check the answer from ChatGPT, and look at that, boom, it's pretty much what I just wrote. Now I can do that iteratively. This is the thing, it's engaging and it's just immediate feedback. I can write a Python function that takes a string as input, and then I can come here and check the answer. But it's my belief that at least for things that are pragmatic enough, like programming, mathematics, chemistry, you can trust it enough that it will allow you to at least get started and get past that friction of learning something new or learning a complex topic. Okay, but beyond just creating simple exercises, sometimes you want to brainstorm quick challenge projects that you can do when you're learning something. I can come here and say, write 5 fun challenges to learn Python programming. And it will say, create a program that generates random quotes from famous people and displays them on the screen. Codes should be stored in a file database, and programs should be able to read and display them at random. This is great. This is a great example. This is a great example of a little challenge project that I can do. Create a simple game that allows users to guess a randomly generated number with a certain range. The user should be able to input their guesses, and programs should give them another great example. These are all amazing, simple challenge ideas that you can do to work on your, in this case, on your programming skills. Strategy number 6, it's something that I call explain domain-specific materials. Now, what I mean by that is, I could come here to this binary search algorithm that ChatGPT wrote, and I'm just using this example because it's quick and I have it easily accessible here, and I can just paste it and say, explain to me this code step by step. Let's say even better, line by line. And now what I get in return is literally an explanation of everything that's happening in this function step by step. Now I'm calling this explain domain specific materials, and I'm not calling it explaining code because it's not just for explaining code. My point to drive across, the point I want to make here is that you can explain complex topics using this tool, which for me is just absolutely mind-boggling when you think about the reach of this kind of capability if used, in a loop for learning all sorts of topics. It's just a super powerful learning assistant that you can access through text and get explanations and just, everything you can think of. The fact that you can get it explained in detail, step by step, is just mind-boggling, to be honest. It's just so cool. The 7 and last strategy I'd like to discuss here is what I call exploring personal interests and ideas. Now, the idea here is that, say you have a topic you have an interest in, but you want to kind of brainstorm it a little bit, dive into that topic, which subtopics are interested within that topic that you like. Say something like, for example, I'm really interested in what makes a representation inside of a neural network transferable, right? So I can say something like, can you give me a few ideas on how to explore the subject of transferability in deep learning? And then I can get suggestions for how I can go on. I can get suggestions for how I can go through that topic. He goes on saying, one way to explore is to train a model on a task and then evaluate performance on another. That's kind of boilerplate. For example, train a model on image classification and testing performance on object detection. It can help to determine whether a model has learned general features. Another way is to compare performance of a model that has been pre-trained on a large data set and from another that has been trained from scratch on a smaller one. You can explore transferability by comparing performance of a model that's been trained on a specific domain. And then, so another investigate is fine-tuning a pre-trained model on a different data set, transfer comparing the performance. All right, so these examples are a bit obvious for the topic. However, they do touch upon one core topic within transferability in deep learning, which is this idea of, assess performance of a model trained on one task in another task, right? But I can go deeper. I can say, what makes a representation learned by a simple multi-layer perceptron transferable? And now I'm getting an answer for a more specific question within that first initial topic, right? I want to understand a bit more about transferability in deep learning, machine learning. And then he gave me an explanation. He gave me a few ideas suggesting that I would, look into this idea of training a model that's trained on one task and then apply it on another task. And now I'm going deeper. I'm saying, okay, but what makes a representation transferable? And now I'm getting an explanation. Now I won't trust this explanation in its core. I won't trust it with all my heart, right? Because right now, at least, we don't have access to sources, so I wouldn't be able to trust it completely. But I will use it as a kind of trigger to maybe another question that I have, or another path I can pick to go down the road of exploring this subject. Now he's saying a representation learned can be transferable if it has learned features that are useful across different tasks. Sure. This can occur if it's trained on a diverse represented data set, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, but I was looking for something more statistics and, the math behind it. So maybe I can say, mathematically speak, what makes a representation transferable? Because I wanted a more, let's say, technical explanation of transferability. Representation concept transferability can be used to make accurate predictions. There you go. Okay, so here it does fail a little bit. One way to measure is to calculate correlation between features learned by the model on source task and features important for the target task. And then by comparing feature importance, activation patterns. All right, is to evaluate performance. So this paragraph here gave somehow something a little bit more technical, saying that I could calculate correlation between features learned by the model and features that are important for the target task, although this is still kind of vague. Overall, the point here is you can use ChatGPT to kind of like go down the rabbit hole of an idea you had or a topic you're trying to learn. And I think this is really powerful because it kind of ties up to the initial, to the number one strategy that I discussed in the beginning, which was interactive conversations. You can use ChatGPT interactively, and you can get content summarization and detailed explanations and procedures and suggestions for exercises and challenges. You can get explanations for domain-specific materials, like you can explain code, and you can explore your own interests and ideas. So you can create this very minimal workflow with this super powerful model. And I really think that this can boost learning in good ways. Because one of the fears right now, I think, with models, with large language models like ChatGPT, is that they won't help necessarily learning in itself, because now people can get answers for things. But when we just for a second assume that when we overcome the assumption that people will always act on bad intentions, and we assume that they will act on good intentions, right? That they do want to learn and develop their interests. Having a powerful tool with which you can get immediate feedback, engage, ask questions, get challenges from it, and you don't have to go around the entire internet looking for that one source that has that one thing. You don't have to waste time searching when you can just get what you need. I really think that this just drives deep learning of things and just drives learning itself. You can just really, there's no limit to what you can do when you can quick iterate over problems, ideas, things you're interested in. I guess that's the point I wanted to make with this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Cheers.